Iran is not Venezuela. Like Trump made a huge mistake now because he thought that every country is like Venezuela. He go there, kidnap the leader, and he go, and then there's no retaliation. I think we're witnessing the beginning phase of a very new chapter of history, and which could potentially just change the entire global world order we have seen from at least 1991 to the present. The Iranians have no choice. Like right now, there's no choice. There's voice of reformist, more like moderate stance have no markets right now. Israelis have been doing very actively in promoting pro-Israel propaganda on Chinese media and on Chinese intelligentsia as well. U.S. interest and the Israeli interests don't perfectly align with each other. The Israelis cannot decide what to ban in Chinese media or what to not ban. You will be eventually pushed to that situation because the West is imposing war on Russia and Iran already, and they're going to impose that pressure on China very soon, or it's already happening. So eventually, the three countries will be pushed to closer. The overall public opinion in China is overwhelmingly pro-Palestine, super pro-Palestine, and also not only Palestine, but also pro-Iran and its allies in the region, which is, I would say, a very resistance.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My guest today is Sheng, who is a non-resident research fellow at Koch University, Turkey. His research focuses on West Asian politics and China's relations with the West and South Asia. Beyond academia, he works as a political commentator, contributing articles and appearing in media across several platforms. He's the author of a thought-provoking article from Global Anti-Imperialism to the Dandelion Fighters, China's solidarity with Palestine from 1950 to 2024, which explores China's relationship with Palestine struggle under Israeli occupation. So thank you for being here, Shang. Great to be talking to you.
Thank you very
How are
much.
you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you for taking your time to talk to me. So how's your day been so far?
It's going well, and just interested in looking at the new development in the region, and it's quite concerning. But at the same time, I think we're witnessing the beginning phase of a very new chapter of history, and which could potentially just change the entire global world order we have seen from at least 1991 to the present. So it's a very concerning and sad moment for people in the region, but at the same time, it's also a very like historically important and significant and meaningful moment in which we might see something like we possibly can see something like more more equal than the current world order taking place. Yeah.
Yeah. I, um, you mentioned 1991. That's when I think United Nations became the sole power in the world, I guess, after the Cold War ended and their
Yeah,
military bases
1991. Yeah,
expanded
like
in West Asia.
basically
Yeah.
that's when the Soviet Union
Yeah.
dissolved. That's what I mean. It's like this bipolar world order, like shared by the United States and the Soviet Union, was gone, and the United States became unprecedentedly powerful and was basically like the hegemon of the world from 1991 to the present. And what I think we're witnessing is that this type of unipolar world system is coming to an end very soon.
Yeah, that's true. I heard last night that Trump has called off attacks on the power plants in Iran. And it's very interesting. He said that he has done some talks with the Iranian officials and there's a 5 day pause. I was sort of thinking, why 5 day? It's because the stock market opens on Monday, so 5 days will be the entire weekday, Monday to Friday. So he didn't want to rattle the stock market too much. So he said, okay, 5 days, and after that we'll think about it.
Yeah, and
He's
then
very
also like we don't know much more information about that so-called dialogue or negotiation between the United States and Iran because the Iranian side denied that. The Iranian side that says we're not talking to him to about the truce, and they deny the existence of this type of negotiation. So it's also possible that Trump was basically saying this thing to stabilize his own stock market for his own I mean, he's only not only like for the I don't like not only refer to the United States, but also like referring to Trump's his personal interest in this stock market thing. So like we don't know much about like whether that negotiation is real or not. There's a possibility that he just like say that for stabilizing the stock market, and there is a possibility that Trump wants to get out of the war, but he's no longer able to, and he started something that he can no longer control. That's a very high possibility we're witnessing at this moment.
That's correct. I think, like you mentioned, Iranian officials have they have confirmed that no such talks have happened. Also, who in their right mind would trust America and Israel now? Because last year, also in the middle of negotiations, America and Israel bombed Iran.
Yeah,
This year,
yeah.
also in the middle of negotiations, they both bombed Iran. Who would be stupid enough to trust both of these countries? And also, it's very interesting. What Iranians say is that they don't want a ceasefire; they want a permanent end to war, and that's very telling, I guess. How do you take that? How do you take that stance of Iran?
I think right now the Iranians, let's say, before the start of the war, at least the Iranians were. I mean, Iran is actually a very diverse society, and within the so-called Iranian regime, you can see different factions of different ideologies existing. By ideology, I mean like their attitude toward the West. We generally think that there's three main groups. One is the religious clergy class, and one is the Revolutionary Guards, right? The more like not the national military, but the Revolutionary Guard, which is more anti-Western and more hardcore type of group of people. And another one is basically the civil servants group, which is generally speaking more moderate in their attitude toward the West. They want to focusing on like economic things. They want to like at least not fight a war with the U.S. So there's three different major factions. I mean, this is a very simplified um, portray, and the reality is more even more complicated than this. But uh, we can like use those three layers to mainly to like understand what is going on in Iran. And I think before the war, the different factions definitely have different, still have a lot of debate. And how many, like the previous, the deceased, the martyred, or whatever you want to call leader, the previous leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, he was a very, like I would say that he's very moderate in terms of his views on how Iran should deal with the West. Like he's not this type of like warmonger person you see on the Western media's portray, and like how Western media wants to demonize him. He's not like that. He's actually a very moderate person. Like this is a guy who has been against developing nuclear weapon. Actually, he has been trying to minimize the range of the missiles of the Iranian nuclear of the Iranian missile industry, because he doesn't want to make the range of the Iranian missile too long to irritate the West and to threaten the West. And this is also a person who essentially put an end into suicide bombing. Like he deliberately gave out orders saying that we should not do that, and then basically like since Khamenei, you don't see that happening anymore, right? So this is a very very moderate, very sometimes you can see like a more like incrementalist, like slightly reformist type of leader. And even his understanding of religion, if you compare him to some other ayatollahs, you find that he's actually like in the more reforming end, right? Like comparing to like some other more conservative religious figures. So before the war, that was like, so Iran was like, some people are arguing that we should be more hardcore, and some people are probably like arguing that we should not be that hardcore. And this debate, you see that since uh, October 7th of 2023, this debate has been going on in Iran like very, very fiercely. Like there are people who are arguing that like, oh, we should go in more support of the Palestinian armed groups, and also we should be more involved with the situation in Lebanon, in Syria, while some other ones are saying like, oh, let's wait and see. We don't want to irritate the Americans too much and things like that. And with this war and with the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei, you don't like the Iranians have no choice. Like right now, there's no choice. There's voice of reformist, more like moderate stance have no market right now because Americans and Israelis don't want to even negotiate with you. So what can you do, right? Like you're like basically pushing to the corner. There's no other option, and we see that with the new Ayatollah Khamenei, the Khamenei Jr. Mojtaba Khamenei, you see that he's definitely a person who's more hardcore than his father's figure because this person, he basically his entire career was largely rising from the Revolutionary Guard. So we see that we have a like right now, not we have, but Iran has has a new supreme leader who is much more closely connected to the hardcore faction of the Revolutionary Guard than the previous supreme leader is. Right? The previous supreme leader was um, a little less connected to the Revolutionary Guard than the previous and then the current one. So we that's what we're witnessing, and for that reason, I don't think the Iranians are going to stop the war at this moment because they are fighting for their survival. Their their essential, like the very existence of not only the regime but also the entire country of Iran, is put into threat by the U.S. and Israeli invasion, and there's nothing they can do at this moment except going continue this resistance. No. And I don't think they would let Trump to say like, oh, like I come to the country, bomb your country, kill your leader, and then I'm going out. I don't think they would allow that because Iran is not Venezuela. Like Trump made a huge mistake now because he thought that every country is like Venezuela. He go there, kidnap the leader, and he go, and then there's no retaliation. Uh, Bad for him, but Iran is not like that. That's so like I think we're witnessing is that this war is going to continue, and Iran is not going to let him go without cost, and also Netanyahu is not going to let Trump go. Netanyahu wants to continue this thing. Netanyahu is not going to let the United States leave, and United States will be dragged by Israel more and more into this war. That's my speculation.
No, that's correct. And the term that you used, incremental reformist, for the now assassinated Khamenei, is very true. That's what I've heard as well. And it's very telling because in Afghanistan, America replaced Taliban with Taliban after 20 years of occupation or trying to suppress Taliban. And in Iran, in just like a week, they replaced a reformist Khomeini with a hardline Khomeini. So you can trust America to, to basically destroy everything that can be
Yeah,
done for constructive, let's say,
yeah,
dialogue
yeah,
and
exactly.
negotiations. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then uh, probably 4 or 5 hours ago, something like that, Trump talked to a couple of American news channels saying that he has successfully carried out regime change in America, saying that the new regime is not the old regime, so this is a successful operation by America. So I think in his mind, you're right. He's trying to get out of the war by clutching on whatever straws he can get hold of. But I don't think Israel would let America leave because I heard that Israel has bombed or tried to bomb some power plants in Iran just recently, probably a few hours ago as well. So Israel wants to drag America fully into the war. Um, what's your take? How long can Israel and America go on? And we don't see the destruction that's happening in Israel because
mm,
I think there is some censorship in Israel, so we don't see the pictures. We only see the videos or pictures that I think that Israel wants to show the world. Uh, but from Iran, we are seeing a lot more devastation, obviously because it's a very big country,
yeah.
a lot of people there. But in your assessment, how long do you think Iranians can go on defending their territory? Any idea?
I think the Iranians continue for quite a long time at this moment, and there's a reason why that if you look at the Iranian retaliation to Israel in the last 3 weeks, almost right, 3 weeks, and you see that actually the Iranians didn't do that much. Like the major target was not Israel. The major target was the Gulf states, and the Iranians do that for a reason because they understand that Israel is geographically more far away, and they tried last year in the 12 Days War, which the Iranians, I would argue, that did not perform that well in the 12 Days War. And right now in this round, they're performing much, much better. And in the 12 Days War, they realized that like just like by like shooting out missiles, it's not hurting the the Israel U.S. alliance that much, right? So this time they changed the strategy by saying that, oh, we're going to basically destroy the entire oil industry and oil trade in the Persian Gulf if you continue threatening our existence. And I think that's the plan. They're doing that quite well. And with Israel, what they have been doing is that they shoot periodically. They would like shoot missiles every day towards Israel and to test the Israeli air defense system. And what we have seen is that the Israelis are sort of running out their interceptors. I mean, yesterday what we see is that the Iranian missile was even like landing in the Israeli nuclear research center in the Negev desert. Right, that's a very very dangerous thing for the Israelis, and that also shows you that the Israeli interception system is not as strong as it was like 3 weeks ago. Right, right. So it seems like the Iranians are able to, by wasting the intercepting system of Israel, is able to eventually get through. And I think is in the Iranian plan that they would continue doing this thing until the Israelis probably like run out of interceptor, and then they might launch a larger attack to Israel's own territories. And also we see that the war in southern Lebanon is going on, but Hezbollah and the Houthis have not launched like full-on attack on Israel yet. Right? So we could expect that. I would say like that's probably something the Iranians and their allies might do in the next like several weeks or month or something. And my speculation is that this thing is going to continue for a long time. And I do believe that Iran is determined to basically like coexist with this war. Like you see, like they're not in hasty in ending this war, and then they're going to continue doing this thing for quite a long time. And I'm determined. I'm confident that they're able to do that. I mean, what can the Israelis and Americans have already bombed Tehran, and they have bombed like so many cities and killing so many people, but they're not able to really instigate a real regime change or anything like that, unless the Americans send ground soldiers there. And for a huge country like Iran, which is about 90 million population, the Americans would need to mobilize like about like maybe 500,000 soldiers or even more in order to like launch any sort of like massive ground troop invasion. Just like sending a few thousands of Marines there is not going to like do anything at all. Like I don't understand what Trump is thinking about. The idea of like sending Marines there is just going to be wasted. So yeah, so like I do believe that the Iranians are planning to coexist with this war, and seems like they are preparing for long-term resistance. That's what I sense.
Yeah, I think because when Iran fought with Iraq, I think they've shown that they can fight a long war. I think how long was that war for? Went on for years. I think 6, 7
Yeah,
years or something like
yeah,
that. But then I heard a comment from Iranian officials that during the month of Ramadan, they were just on the defensive, and after the month of Ramadan, they will go on offensive. So I think you're right. They will launch probably heavier missiles or missiles that can do more damage to Israel. And it's very interesting how they have intelligently taken out the interceptors in the Gulf countries. So that's how they first started. So clearly, Iranians had a plan that in case America or Israel attack, this is what we're going to do first. We're going to take out the interceptors surrounding our borders, and then we're going to keep bombing Israel as well. It seems like America didn't have any plan at all. They just thought that maybe assassinating the leadership uh, will give them a quick victory, but Iran is not like that. I think in some way CIA and Mossad they have made serious miscalculation in trying to understand how Iranian government is set up and how different tiers of government work. So clearly it hasn't really worked that well for America and Israel.
Yeah, and I think actually it's, in this case you would find that U.S. interest and Israeli interest don't perfectly align with each other. This war, I can hardly find any justification for the Americans to launch this war. It's very, very weird. And for the Israelis, it make more sense because, let me tell you something is that about the current mess in the Persian Gulf. The United States is very worried about that, and they should be, because this thing is related to the very essence of U.S. hegemony, which is a petrodollar system. Right? United States in the past decades, and you can trace it even like back to the 1960s and even 50s. The United States has been trying to secure the Persian Gulf, trying to secure the oil supply, and this is related to the financial hegemony of the dollar system. So right now, if the Iranians and the Gulf states started to, like, all of those oil facilities in Iran and the Gulf Arab countries are destroyed by the war, that's going to be like a huge threat to the petrodollar system, and U.S. hegemony is possible to collapse, because of this war. But for the Israelis, it's a different thing. Israel doesn't care. And why is that Israel doesn't care is because if you look at for Israel first, Iran is the largest rival or threat to Israel in the region. Right? Iran. If you look at what the Iranian axis of resistance has done, is that they have caused the largest damage to Israel ever since Israel's birth to the present. Like even if you compare them to like Nasser's Egypt and everyone, for all the rivals of Israel has ever had, I think Iran and its allies are the strongest one who cause the most damage. So for Israel, of course, they want to destroy Iran. That's what Netanyahu wanted to do for the last 2 decades at least. And there's also the thing is that the Israelis don't care about the Gulf Arab states too. And I would actually say that they probably want to see the Iranians destroying a lot of oil facilities in the Gulf Arab states, because those Gulf Arab states, yes, they are American allies, but they're seen as potential threats to Israeli national security as well. You know, like if you look at Saudi Arabia, the Israelis were the Israelis have been there's a huge literature if you look at how the Israeli academia or like retired former government officials write about things related to Saudi Arabia. They're always thinking that okay, Saudi Arabia has been exporting Wahhabism for the last 20 years and more, and Saudi Arabia in the past there are cases of Saudi Arabia like giving money, and Saudi Arabia, Qatar, those money, those Gulf Arab countries giving money to organizations like Hamas or the Muslim Brotherhood and in Egypt and things like that. And the Israelis have been thinking about, like, let's say, if there's some sort of regime change in Saudi Arabia in the past, because right now it's basically a absolute monarchy. What if the monarchy fall? You know, if the monarchy fall, you could have something could like a Sunni version of Iran's Islamic revolution. You know, like this type of thing. So the Israelis are very afraid of that. So the Israelis don't want to see the Gulf Arab states in a prosperous shape as well. They want to see both Iran and the Gulf Arab states being weakened, and they don't care if this is related to the petrodollar system or not. That's not their interest. Their interest is to see this war continuing, see Iran getting destroyed, and then see the Gulf Arab states getting severely weakened. And that fits into the Israeli interest. So the Israeli interest and American interest on the Persian Gulf issue actually do not perfectly overlap with each other. And I would say like largely contradict with each other. But Donald Trump is basically doing this thing with a very particular manner that he probably thought that like after they assassinated Khamenei, the Iranian regime might fall. And then he also did this very stupid thing of like calling on the Kurds to rebel, which is very awkward because like 2 months before this thing, United States just betrayed the Kurds in Syria. The Kurds they have been like invested in like for like more than 10 years or something, and then they just like sold out the Kurds to the Julani regime in Syria. And 2 months later, they just like try to call upon the Kurds to fight for them again. And it's very bad calculation. And even if you say like even if some Kurds are willing to fight for the United States, it's a very small group of people compared to the overall demography of Iran. It's not going to be like it's not possible that those people like overthrew the entire Iranian regime or anything like that. So apparently, the Trump administration don't even have a plan about how to do this war. I'm pretty sure that Netanyahu has a plan, and Netanyahu's plan is going well. Netanyahu's plan is to drag the United States into the war, to fight, and that's also why in the I think 3 4 days ago you see that the U.S. is really bombing of the oil facilities in Iran, and that fits into Israel's interest as well because what the Israelis are thinking is that by bombing the oil facilities in Iran, Iranians would definitely retaliate than bombing oil facilities in Saudi Arabia or any other like those Gulf states, so that United States cannot leave. United States would have to be like remain in this war, and United States eventually would send ground troops to fight with the Iranians, and all of those things fit into Israel's interest as well. So I think, yeah, like in some ways, like I think Donald Trump definitely don't have a plan about what he wants to do, while the Israelis probably have a plan that do not really serve the American interests, but have their own interests.
Yeah, and also the fact that most of the air defense systems were taken away from the Gulf countries and then sent to Israel to defend Israel.
Yeah,
And then the THAAD system from South Korea was flown over to Israel or shipped to Israel to defend Israel. That clearly shows that America's priority is to save Israel, not
yeah,
its so-called Gulf country allies or South Korea. Uh, but I think Gulf countries, I don't think they do care because obviously they are getting bombed. But after this war is over, whichever way it goes, whether America Israel wins or whether Iran manages to keep Israel and America out of Iran, uh, Gulf countries will still go with America. That's my feeling, mainly because they like Americans on their soil so they can keep their monarchies and dictatorship. Uh, and like you mentioned, revolution is something that no Gulf country wants because it's
mm,
going to take away all most of their wealth if there's a democracy in any of those Gulf countries. So they would still go with America, knowing fully well that America has no interest in protecting any of the Gulf countries and it will always choose Israel. And also, the issue of Kurds, and then Hezbollah and Yemeni Houthis. So this war will be fought on many different fronts, I guess, if it drags on any longer. So in that case, Israel geographically is a very small country compared to Iran.
Mm.
Iran is very big, which is why Iran is taking so much damage, because you can bomb many old cities in Iran. And Israel, people go inside the bunkers so they don't get uh, injured or killed. But I thought that if Iran wanted, Iran could have done more damage to Israel, given its very narrow geographic location. It's just
Yeah.
like a belt like this. But maybe the videos or pictures haven't come out yet from Israel, so we don't know how much damage has been done. Uh, but one thing is true, that the air defense systems of Israel, they are not as strong now as they were at the start of the war. Um, so it will be interesting how Iranians proceed now. But do you see? And also because Iran is so big, and I was talking to Larry C. Johnson. He was an ex-CIA analyst. He said that if America needs to send troops in Iran, they would probably have to send 1 million soldiers, and they should be ready to pay some heavy cost, because
Yeah.
there will be a lot of casualties. It's not an easy terrain, and Iranians know how to fight. I think there's a reason why Iran has never been colonized, because they know how to defend their territory. I guess so. Uh, so let's say if this war ends, do you see any change in the economic conditions of the Gulf countries? The reason I'm asking is because Iran is now asking payments in yuan, Chinese currency, for the ships crossing Strait of Hormuz. Do you see that trend continuing after the war?
Yeah, I think so. I think this war is very likely that is going to change a lot of things we've taken for granted for the last at least 30 years. Like for example, let's say one scenario is that this war continues for a long time, that Iran is going to continue retaliating toward the Gulf countries as well, and then Israel and United States, of course. And this thing could cause the Persian Gulf not being able to engage in the oil trade for like very long time. Like right now we're not seeing the huge impact of the oil shortage because it's just like starting for 3 weeks. But if you wait for like like 2 months, 2 to 3 months, in historical cases, normally like in 2 to 3 months, you see the pain of that type of oil shortage. And if the Persian Gulf is taken, is going like the trade of the Persian Gulf is going to be destroyed by this war, there is no coming back. You will see that like Persian Gulf just like start like would cease to become the world's major supply of oil, and that's going to entirely reshape the entire world. For the region, for example, the all of those rich Gulf Arab monarchies would be very worried because like the oil money is not only the thing providing them money, but also providing their safety. A very major reason why there is no revolution in those countries is because the literature called this like rentierism. It's basically like the monarchies giving out money, welfare to the people living in those monarchies in exchange for not having revolution, right? So if their uh, oil revenue is gone, that's going to have like very huge existential threats to all of those Arab Gulf monarchies that we can think about, and that can totally change the overall map of the region. And outside of the region, that's going to be even like a more huge deal. Like all of those countries, depending on oil for manufacture, is going to have a lot of economic crisis, and is going to further damage the overall like declining global economy. And the U.S. allies in other places, like for example in East Asia, like South Korea, Japan. Those U.S. allies are very. They're like they don't produce oil, but they consume a lot of oil, and then they consume oil for manufacture. So those countries, their economy can be paralyzed, and they would not have the thing they can produce to export to the United States. While meanwhile, like who has the oil supply? It's Russia. So the Russians would be like doing very well in the next, let's say, a couple of years even, and that can totally change the map of the Russia-Ukraine war and its significance to the world. While the Chinese would need to buy more oil from Russia, which would further glue China and Russia together. And if we see that like first, China needs to buy more oil from Russia. Second, the because Russia has more money because of the oil trade, so Russian performance in the Ukraine war might be very different. So those two things added together might eventually push the Chinese to even like change its existing stance on the Ukraine thing. Right, that would be like very different, like very different thing for the U.S. China Russia triangle relationship, and that thing would be going like be a very negative impact on the United States. And meanwhile, I think if the war continues, if Iran continues to resist as in the current pace, I would imagine that the Chinese and Russians would not only continue trading with Iran. I want to emphasize that is like China has been trading with Iran for the last a couple of years, despite the uncertainties, despite U.S. sanctions in the region and everything. China has been trading with them. China is trading with them right now, which you can see that as a way of indirect economic support for Iran. And if we see this war continuing being like this, and if you see that the U.S. is dragged into the war more and more by Netanyahu, we could have seen something even more. I would imagine that the Russians and the Chinese might be like exporting more things into Iran, like more military related technologies or like satellite system. I think they're already like sharing. I guess I don't have evidence on this thing, but like I guess is that Iranians are definitely like using either the Russian satellite system or the Chinese satellite system or both of them. I don't know, but if you look at the precision of Iranian attack in the last 3 weeks, that's the only conclusion you can make, right? And the Chinese and Russians might export more like equipment that the Iranians can use into production for their arms, their missiles, whatever things going on, and this can be a very prolonged war. And if the United States is dragged more into it by sending ground forces into Iran, this thing can like we would see a very ironic picture of Iran becoming sort of a Ukraine, but of the Chinese and the Russians. It's like how the United States has been using Ukrainians against Russia for the last 4 years by gluing Russia into Ukraine and by like sending out equipment in Ukraine and using Ukraine to weaken Russia. Iran can be like a Ukraine for the United States, serving the Chinese and Russian interest. That could be something happening. And also, if U.S. engagement in the Middle East continues, and if there's economic crisis, as I was mentioning, in East Asia caused by the oil shortage, the current stability or current status quo of East Asia might change. And you don't know what the Chinese might do. There's a likelihood that the policymakers in Beijing come to the conclusion that, okay, this is a good time for us to unify Taiwan militarily. Could be a possibility. That's seems like it's going to that direction if the U.S. engagement in the Middle East continues. So this can have a this can lead to a lot of different scenarios and possibilities that we're looking at. And seems like all of those possibilities that we're looking at are going against the favor of the United States. There's only one scenario that would benefit the United States. That is Iran just like collapse automatically. And we don't see that. We did not see that in the last 3 weeks, and we are not seeing that right now. And I do not believe that we're going to see that in the anytime in the future. So that possibility is not happening. And any other possibilities is only going to cause unfavorable impact for the United States.
Yeah, I think Russia and China will be very happy right now seeing the bad performance of America in Iran. They must be thinking if Iran can't even control, no, if USA can't even control Iran, how can USA fight Russia and China in Russia and China? I guess so. Russian and Chinese governments will be very happy with the with what's going on with USA. Also, it's creating a lot of stress and drain on American economy because they've recently asked for $200 billion, and we
Hmm.
know they asked for $200 billion. They would probably actually need more than $200 billion to fund this war. So where would the money come from? American economy is not rising as fast as Chinese economy. America is actually going down when it comes to the standard of living. The people don't really have that much food, that much social security. So all this money could have gone to develop their own social infrastructure to help their own people, building suburbs, schools, education centers, or bringing some other industries back to America. But none of that sort has happened. What's happening is very interesting. America keeps spending money to protect an external country called Israel. So Israel has free healthcare. I think their schooling is free. Their housing is much more affordable than American housing. So it's like a paradise, but not
Hmm.
for Americans who are funding it, for Israelis. So it's very interesting how Americans are okay with sacrificing their own comfort for the sake of another external country.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting seeing that dynamic from the outside. But uh, I do want to talk about Taiwan, but I just want to finish this this
Hmm.
Iran-US thing first. So this Strait of Hormuz, so it's open for everybody except for US and its allies. That's what Iran says. Uh, we have seen ships passing through Strait of Hormuz, and Iran hasn't touched them if they are friendly ships. But this oil crisis, I think it's going to get even worse. Um, do you have any feeling whether NATO or European Union or any of the European countries would join the war as actively as Israel and America? Do you think that
I
would
don't believe so.
happen?
I don't think so. I
Hmm.
don't think anyone's going to join the war. Yeah. Because that's what Donald Trump has been trying. In the last 2 weeks, he has been trying. He has been like even like desperately trying to drag the NATO into it, and NATO says no, we're not doing that. And even like if you look at Spain, Spain is even like openly against this war, openly criticizing Israel, openly in support of ending the war. And then they published a lot of diplomatic statements that are even like explicitly in support of the people in Gaza and the people of Iran, which is, I mean, happily surprising to people, considering what Europe has been doing in the past. But Spain is really like doing a lot of, I think, morally very good thing that should be written in the history book for the future. And meanwhile, all of those U.S. allies are not interested in joining the war. I mean, even Germany. Like I specifically like mentioned Germany because Germany is the like I subjectively use this word, but like Germany is really doing the worst thing in support of Israeli genocide of the Palestinians, and this is I'm personally disgusted by what Germany has done in the past 2 years. And I apologize. This part is not very objective of my analysis. It's just like my feeling that what the German government has been doing, comparing to other Western governments, who has been basically accomplice in this genocide. But if you compare Germany to the degree that the UK or France is doing, like Germany is like much worse than any of other Western governments besides the United States, right? So even Germany is not interested in like joining this direct war against Iran. And I also want to emphasize that even if they want to, like even if those European countries want to, they don't have soldiers. They don't have enough soldiers being able to send to the region. Like as we talk about for like a 90 million country of Iran, like the United States needs to mobilize probably 1 million people and at least have to send 500,000 into Iran because if you look at in 2003, the number of people United States mobilized to occupy Iraq, right? And Iraq during that time, the population of Iraq is, I would say, probably like about one third of the population of Iran today, because that was 20 years ago. So you need to like, if you calculate that, that means United States need to send probably like at least 500,000 into Iran right now, and then they need to mobilize about 1 million or even more. And and if you consider that, it's like none of the European countries have that type of reserved number of soldiers, and it does not seem to me that they're interested. Also, they dare not to do so because if they send all of the soldiers to Iran, who's going to stop the Russians in the Ukraine frontier, right? That's going to further help Russia, which the Europeans are like the Western Europeans are very scared of. So they are not interested, and Donald Trump wanted to even drag Japan into the thing. And even the Japanese, despite the fact that they're having like one-sidedly pro-US and basically surrendering to US demand every time in the US-Japan negotiation, but with like about like sending soldiers into Iran, that's something even the Japanese cannot do, and they do not want to do that. And why do I say that Trump has been very desperate in trying to get people involved? Is because if you look at his Twitter, he even mentioned that he want to drag the Chinese into this thing. And I was like, what are you thinking about? He says like, oh, China and Japan and every country should send navy to the Strait of Hormuz to help their trade. And I was like, man, you are like being like so detached from the reality we're living in. And the fact that he's saying those things really shows that he has no plan and he has no clue about how to get out of this war. He really wants to end this war, but he does not know how to do so. So he repeatedly called for NATO or Japan or any other US allies to get into the war, and no one's listening to him. And right now he's even like calling like the Chinese ships into the Strait of Hormuz. So you see that he's so detached from reality, and he's showing that he's very desperate at this moment.
Yeah, Trump isn't capable of handling this. Not that he was capable before when he was first elected for his first term. Uh, like you mentioned, it was Israel who wanted to drag America into the war and then let America fight most of the war while Israel takes Lebanese land. So I think they have ethnically cleansed 800,000 Lebanese now from Lebanon so
Yeah.
far. And that was one of the main objectives of launching this war on Iran as well. But it's very interesting. Germany has gone from one genocide to another genocide. It's like
Yeah.
they're a genocidal nation. What are they doing?
Yeah.
They should learn from their history. But no,
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing
yeah,
that Germany is always on the wrong side of history. You know,
they
like
are always,
they're always on the wrong side
always.
of history. And right now, they're determined, the most determined. Like other than United States, Germany is the most determined in supporting Israeli genocides in Palestine and now in southern Lebanon as well. It's amazing. Like always amazes me like how and why the Germans are always on the wrong side of history and in support of genocide.
Yeah, and they after United States they provide the largest amount of funding to Israel,
Yeah.
or aid, whatever you want to call it. So I do want to touch on Taiwan, but before that, I think you had a YouTube video in which you talk about the poetic portrayal of the Palestinian people as
Yeah.
Dandelions. So are you able to explain why you did that?
Why I did that? Or, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not a terminology I invented. It's
right.
something I observed on Chinese internet, which is very interesting. That since the since this round of the war between Israel and and Palestine, you see that more and more Chinese younger generation people are starting to not only have more interest in understanding what things in Middle East is about, but also started to like the overall public opinion in China is overwhelmingly pro-Palestine, super pro-Palestine, and also not only Palestine, but also pro-Iran and its allies in the region, which is
So
I
basically,
would say a
pro
very
freedom, I guess. Yeah,
yeah, for pro resistance,
yeah,
including armed resistance. That's I would say a major difference between Chinese society and many so-called leftists that you see in the West. Is like they're like, oh, we like free Palestine, but every time when they talk about like Iran and other things, they started to like freak out. They're like, no, like we don't like Iran and other things. For the Chinese, it's a different thing. I want to make very clearly that the overall public opinion in China is not only pro-Palestine, but also pro the axis of resistance, pro armed struggles, all the armed struggles are anti-U.S. and anti-Israeli imperialism. That's something we're seeing in China, and China, as we know, is a very is a country with beautiful literature traditions. So some person, I don't know who is the first person to invent this terminology, but some Chinese young people on internet first started to use the word dandelion to refer to the for the to the Hamas military personnel who participated in the attack in October 7th. So they why they use this plant, the dandelion, because dandelion is something that the wind blows it or you blow it, the seed flies, right? So the Chinese internet like netizens, they see two things. One, because that attack, the Al-Aqsa flood attack was by parachute, so it looks like a dandelion flying in the wind. And second thing, the dandelion seeds, whatever place they fly to, they fall into the ground and then they grow up. They become another dandelion, right? So it's a seed of life. So they see that the Palestinians are flying back to their homeland, occupied by foreigners, and they when they go back, they will eventually grow. That's the resilience of the Palestinians. So someone in China came up with this idea of referring to the armed personnel of Hamas parachute force as dandelions, and then this practice became widely popularized on Chinese internet. Like everyone started to use that term. Everyone started to adopt that term, and you see a lot of videos on Chinese internet doing that type of thing. Like they, like for example, like I wrote an article about this. I cited some of those titles of the videos. For example, they have a title of a video they made titled saying that like mother, I turn to a seed of the dandelion and fly to the motherland we came from. To as a poetic way of describing this military operation. And also in the same year when the True Promise missile strike of Iran was launched, which landed in Israel, you know, well, how the Chinese were netizens described this thing. they also use a very poetic language. They say that the souls of the dead children of Gaza turned into those missiles and then returned to the land they came from. And I personally find that very like emotionally vivid. So I quoted this thing in my article, and I introduced this cultural phenomenons to audiences in the non-Chinese language speaking world. Because I think it's something that important for us to understand the Chinese public opinion, but also it's something that in the West you cannot say those things because of the political atmosphere in the West. You cannot say those things, and but in China, like, people have been saying those things. I think so. I want to use those as examples to telling the audiences in the West that in the non-Western world they have a different political atmosphere, that people are holding very different political opinions than the mainstream narratives in the West. And I think whether you agree with that or not, you need to understand that this is a political reality in the non-Western world. So that's something I quoted. It's not my invention. It's something I
That's right.
quoted.
So, isn't there any Israeli propaganda or Israeli media machine in China? Because there is a huge Israeli media machine in Australia where they've banned the use of certain terms in Australia. You cannot even protest, so Palestinian protests are banned over here in Australia. Are they not active in China?
Yeah, they are. They are very
Yeah.
active,
Okay.
but it's a different thing. So like China, as we know, is a country with this unique political system. Right? It's a one party street. I mean, technically, it's not a one party system, but like it's like a one party ruling with multiple other parties cooperating with this one party system, right? So so basically, it's impossible for any foreign power or foreign lobby groups to infiltrate into the Chinese government system, because it's a Leninist party basically. It's a very internalized system. So it's not possible for the lobby groups to infiltrate. So the Israelis cannot decide what to ban in Chinese media or what to not ban. Right. So that's a freedom that like Chinese medias have, but at the same time, China has state-led media, but China also has non-state-led media, like more commercialized media as well. And Israelis have been doing very actively in promoting pro-Israel propaganda on Chinese media and on Chinese intelligentsia as well. So I would say, I mean, it's my personal opinion. Not everyone agree with this thing, but my opinion is that China is a society in which the government and the grassroots people in general are more skeptical or even like anti-West, like have that idea of like anti-US, anti-West. While the people in the middle, which I refer to the academic intelligentsia, the journalism, and those like middle class people are more pro-West. That's the overall political spectrum in China. So you would find that in the last, like since the genocide in Gaza took place, there's a lot of pro-Israel scholars in Chinese academia. There's a lot of pro-Israel journalism you find on Chinese media, and either they are saying things in favor of Israeli narrative by saying that like the Palestinians are religious extremists or things like that, or they say things like uh, the casualties the Israelis killed in Gaza is overrated, overestimated, and or they at the same time they promote a narrative saying that, oh, like Israeli military operation has been going very successfully, Hamas is taken out, Hezbollah has failed, Iran is failing, and all of that, right? So like you see those pro-Israel propaganda existing, but the and also Israeli embassy in Beijing, they are organizing this propaganda themselves too. You know, they we in China we have something called Weibo, which is basically similar to Twitter in the Western world. It's a Chinese platform, and every embassy in China have their platform in have their account, public account in this platform, and the Israelis have been trying to promote their propaganda on those social media platform. So in the beginning, they started to spread false information. So one of the hostages taken by Hamas was half Israeli, half Chinese. Her mom is from China. A person who basically she was funded by the Chinese government to study abroad, and then she tear off her agreement. She used the Chinese scholarship money, and then she tears off her agreement and never came back to China and married an Israeli guy and stayed in Israel. So the Israeli embassy was in the beginning was trying to spread false information by saying that her daughter is Chinese. She's not Chinese. She's Israeli citizen, but the Israeli embassy was spreading the false information saying that a person born in Beijing is taken as hostage by Hamas, which is not true. She was not born in Beijing. She was born in Israel. And later they started to, and this false information thing did not go well because people, the, as I said, like the Chinese netizens are overwhelmingly pro-Palestine. People started like search about this and they figure out like, okay, this are all false information, and then they realized that this person's Chinese mom is someone who's morally questionable in our eyes. So, so this thing did not go well. It did not generate any sympathy toward Israel. So later, the Israeli embassy started to launch out statements openly criticizing the Chinese government's stance on the Gaza issue, and then they published this thing in Chinese platform. And later on the Women's Day, they organized. They try to play this feminism card again. You know, like they organized this event saying that let's get together and talk about women's rights. And then they say like, oh, like we have women being taken to Gaza by the Hamas terrorists and things like that. And during the same time, the German embassy and U.S. embassy in Beijing are cooperating throughout the entire time. That's why I specifically talk about Germany because it's like it's not only like they diplomatically support Israel, it's like they're supporting Israel on every single end you can think about. Even their embassy in Beijing published a statement directly calling the Chinese people as quote unquote ignorant assholes by comparing what the Israeli war crimes doing to the fascist crimes during World War II, like comparing to genocide. And Germany's official embassy account says if you are comparing those two genocides, you are like ignorant assholes. That's like that's a quote. Can you imagine any diplomatic group in a foreign country would do that type of thing, right? So it's amazing part of a German protocol if if you want to learn about it. So the Israelis have been promoting this type of pro-Israel propaganda, and in the last 20 years, they have been cultivating relationship with Chinese universities, academia, and things like that, as they are doing in every single other countries, right? So we do see that, but a very, I would say, a very huge difference in China and many Western countries is that the overall public opinion is not pro-Israel. I mean, all of those propaganda of Israel did not work. Some of them backfired to cause more details toward Israel. I mean, like for example, the false information thing backfired a lot. And one example I can give it to you is that if you today use that Weibo account platform to look at the public account of Israel, they closed their commenting session because everyone is against them. So the funny story is that this only democracy of the Middle East cannot tolerate people's opinion. They closed down the commenting session. And guess who did not? The Palestinian embassy in Beijing did not close down their commenting session. Even though there's a lot of people in the commenting session criticizing the PA, saying that you guys are being weak or something. Now, like there's a lot of criticism toward the PA in the commenting session. The PA never closed down the commenting session, and the Israeli state Israeli closed down a commenting session, and during the genocide in Gaza, the PA embassy in Beijing published a statement, a public statement saying that we got so many phone calls and letters and emails from the Chinese people asking that they want to donate money for us, and we cannot accept that donation. We whatever you donate will be directed to the United Nations, and then they made a very huge ceremony, not ceremony, like a huge event in which they showed the money they have received and then delivered to the United Nations, like the armwa, and that's what the PA did. And the same thing happened to Iran right now. Is that the Iranian embassy in Beijing published a statement saying that we cannot accept donations from the Chinese citizens, but there are so many Chinese citizens calling us, emailing us, and sending letters to us asking how they can donate. You never see that with Israel. I mean, the Israeli embassy, yes, they have a lot of friends in the Chinese media or intelligentsia and all of that, but the common people don't love them that much. They never need to publish a statement saying that, oh, we people are asking about how to donate for us. No one is donating for them. So I think that's really tells you the difference and the trend of the overall public opinion in China about what is going on in the Middle East.
Yeah, I think it's good to see Chinese people backing Palestinians and the freedom fighters in the West Asia. But it's very telling to know that Israel was trying to play the feminist card when there are United Nations reports saying that Israel commits a lot of rape of Palestinian women in Palestine and in prison also. So it's very telling. And also the way they were probably framing this, like you mentioned, Palestinians are religious extremists. Palestine, so they are Muslims, they are Christians, and Israelis have wiped out Christian villages in Palestine as well. So they don't
Yeah,
really care who they are. And for Palestinians, it's not a religious struggle. It's their land that has been stolen. So they are, if if Israel was based on Muslim people, then those Palestinians would be fighting those Muslim people. Or if Israel was a Christian country, Palestinian would be fighting Christians. In this case, Israel has Jewish people, which is why Palestinians are fighting Jewish people in Israel. So it's amazing how they try to frame this around religious extremists. But yeah, it's good
yeah,
to see
yeah.
that Chinese
That's
people
something
don't
they
fall for
focus
that.
on doing.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to share something with you. I want to get your take on this. Let me know when you start seeing the screen.
To erode it. That effort to besiege Israel, not isolated as much as besiege Israel. That is orchestrated by the same forces that supported Iran. Iran's effort to put a military siege on us and ultimately choke us. We were able to break loose from that siege, and we will have to do several things to break loose from this siege that is organized by a few states. One is China, and the other is Qatar. And they are organizing an attack on Israel legitimacy in the social media of the Western world and the United States.
So this was very interesting. This came out probably 6 months ago in October, November. No, yeah, probably in October last year. And I was very surprised that he was openly challenging and alleging that China is behind the hostilities against Israel. So, uh, how do Chinese people know of this? And let's say if they do know, how do they react to these kind of accusations?
I mean, for the Chinese people, we don't take this thing very serious. We don't. I mean, it's a fact, as I just talked about, that the overall public opinion of the Chinese people are sympathetic with Palestine. We have been sympathetic with Palestine since 1950s, and that's the overall public opinion. But at the same time, there's no such a thing as an organized campaign delegitimizing Israel in China because who cares? I mean, I'm sorry, but China is a big country, and the Chinese. I mean, just like to be frank with you, the Chinese only care about how to do things themselves, and then probably the only Western country they care about is the United States, because they think like everyone else is U.S. puppet, and United States is the only one we need to treat seriously and things like that. There's like overall speaking, Chinese don't treat Israel that serious, and I know that in the Western world, people have a lot of let's say, like when people talk about Israel, they have to talk about that in a very cautious way because of historical issues and things like that. But in China, it's like people don't care about Israel, and people don't. China was not in like China was not persecuting people during the Holocaust. Actually, on the contrary, China was helping the Jews during the Holocaust. I don't know
Yeah,
if
yeah,
we know about that. So the Chinese don't feel this the sense of how Israel should have immunity or even like a priority in Chinese rhetoric. So people don't care, and people criticize Israel if people want to criticize Israel, and so there's no need for China to do an organized campaign delegitimizing Israel. And we think the reason why Netanyahu said that is because Netanyahu is a very, very smart politician, let's say. Like whether he's morally questionable, it's another thing, but I would say he's a very smart politician. He understands that right now the U.S.-China relations is getting worsening and worsening, and he deliberately say those things to appeal to the hawkish people in the United States, to the China hawks, to people who hate China in the United States. That's deliberately say that, and you can contrast this thing to Netanyahu's activity in let's say 2016, 2015, and 2016 when Obama was in charge and Obama had some problems with the Israeli human rights violations and things like that. I mean, of course, Obama is overall supporting Israel, but like have some minor criticism to Israeli human rights violations, and then Netanyahu doesn't want to accept that. So Netanyahu was playing the China card. During that time, he went to China for a state visit, in which he said Israel and China are quote unquote marriage made in heaven. And he smartly or cunningly, however you want to put it, tricked the Chinese to invest in the Haifa Bay port. Right, the Chinese did not know much about the situation in the Middle East during that time. They thought that investing in Israel is safe, and they invested in the Haifa Bay port, which is now causing a lot of problems to China because on the one hand, Israelis are threatening that because you don't support us, you don't support our genocide in Gaza, we're going to close down your port. And on the other hand, that port is, of course, a target of the anti-Israel forces in the region. Right? The Hezbollah might attack it because Haifa is in the north. Iran might attack it. The Houthi might attack it. Who knows, right? So it's definitely a very bad investment. But Netanyahu was playing that card during that time. He was like trying to show Obama as like, hey, if you don't listen to what I want you to do, we can turn to China. That was the idea. And but at the same year that he said like, oh, China, Israel is a marriage made in heaven, and he went to India. He went to India, which is a geopolitical, has some problems with China, as we know. And he said the same thing. He said, oh, India and Israel were marriage made in heaven. So this guy, he's like playing those things very consciously to with different parts, different partners of the world. And right now, my guess is that after he realized that the way the plan to drag China in support of Israel in this Gaza genocide is not going to work, and he recognized that it's not also like trying to get China to support his plan to invade Iran is also not going to work. So he decided to, okay, so I'm going to appeal to the anti-China force in the United States. And now he's trying to frame Israel as some sort of like this like Cold War warrior, like this frontier of U.S. hegemony. And it's like we're not only fighting Iran, we're fighting Iran for U.S. hegemony. We're fighting Iran for Western democracies, like the free world, whatever thing. We're fighting Iran to weaken China and Russia as well. He's trying to play that rhetoric in order to get more support from those anti-China hawkish factions in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I think um, I'm not sure how successful Netanyahu will be in making his propaganda against China mainstream, but so far I haven't seen any evidence that China is falling victim to Israeli propaganda, which is a good thing to know, I guess. And you mentioned Taiwan. I just want to bring something up. And this happened in October last year. I think Taiwan invited APAC representatives from Israel. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te, he cited a biblical story of David versus Goliath, and he said that Israel is a model for Taiwan because Israel is David and Palestine is and West Asia is Goliath in this fight of Israel. But he also said that he will buy Israeli, they call it defense weaponry, T-dome air defense system as well. How was that viewed in China when he made these kind of statements? Do you have any idea?
I mean, the Chinese, the Chinese don't take that thing that specifically serious, but the Chinese are also looking at the fact that Israel has been flirting with several anti-China forces in the last few years, and one of them is Taiwan. It's a very 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 it's not like that serious of a threat to China, but it's just like discuss Chinese rather than like threatening the Chinese because Israel's too tiny for us, right? But like for example, another example, similar thing I can give it to you is that as we know, there was this so-called controversy or propaganda campaign about the Uyghur thing in China in the last 3 years, right? And there is this organization called so-called World Uyghur Congress, which is a self-claimed government in exile. And if you look at on October 7th, the World Uyghur Congress made a public statement on their official website saying that we condemn the terrorist attack by the Palestinians. We definitely side with Israel. You can find that on their official website. It's not my propaganda against them. It's a fact that they say that. So it's like Israel. Like the reason why those organizations say that is because they feel like they need to support Israel in order to get the favor from the United States. It's the same logic with the guy from Taiwan saying that, as you mentioned, right? So we know, and also like if you look at Jerusalem Post during the so-called the era of so-called like Uyghur propaganda like controversy going on, Jerusalem Post was quite active in it. They published a lot of things saying that, oh, we're concerned about like Muslim rights in China. I was like, seriously? You? I mean, really? So right, so that's like the one anti-China force they flirted with a lot. and ironically, it's a Uyghur Muslim organization. And at the same time, it's Taiwan. At the same time, like in the last 2 years, I think there are a lot of cases of Israeli senators from the Knesset going into Taiwan for visit, and this is a very huge provocation to the Chinese because China has a condition when we make diplomatic relationship with other country is to recognize one China policy. And what is one China policy is recognizing that there is only one China and the government in Beijing is the only representative of this China, right? And we call them Taiwan right now because it's the island in Taiwan. But if you look at the official name of that regime in Taiwan, it's called Republic of China. So it's like the separation between the Chinese mainland and the Taiwan island at this moment is the product of the Chinese Civil War. So basically, you understand that as there's two political entities in both sides of the Taiwan Strait claiming themselves as China. So if you need to have any sort of diplomatic relationship with the government in Beijing, you need to recognize that you don't have any diplomatic recognition of the government in Taipei. Right, that's the prerequisite. And in the last 2 years, the Israelis are sending senators to Taiwan, and as you mentioned, APEC is right now like something that the regime leader in Taiwan sees that like we can please APEC in order to please Americans so that Americans will have more support for us. And this thing is very common actually. You see that very common is that all of those groups, if you look at how they reacted, for example, the Hong Kong separatist group, the Uyghur separatist group, the Taiwan separatist group, the Tibetan separatist group, like all of those groups, if you check, they all said a lot of things about supporting Israel. And especially after October 7th, they all made public statements saying that we condemn the Palestinians about this thing, and then we support the Israelis and things like that. Because they realize that they need to make Israel happy, and then they want to use that as a bridge to get closer to the Americans. So they make the Israelis happy, so they make the Americans happy. And if the Americans are happy, the Americans support them more. Right? That's the idea going on. So I'm not surprised by that statement. That's something has been going on for the last 2 years, in particular after October 7th. But even before that, people are doing that already. So it's not a very surprising thing to me.
Yeah, it's very ironic that all these separatist movements are aligning with Israel, but in fact, Palestine is trying to get separation or freedom from the Israeli occupation itself. It's very ironic. Thanks very much, Sheng. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I've taken almost 1.5 hours of your time.
That's
I'll
okay.
give you the last word, whatever you want to say.
I mean, yeah, there's lots to say at this moment, but I want to emphasize one thing is that I think when we understand Chinese foreign policy toward the Middle East or even toward the globe, it's important to recognize that China's current foreign policy is shaped by two legacies. One is the Maoist era legacy, right, which is more emphasizing on anti-imperialism, emphasizing revolutionary struggles and supporting national liberation movements and things like that. Another legacy is the Dengist legacy, which shaped by Deng Xiaoping after the Chinese economic reform. And that legacy is more emphasizing on trade, economy, peaceful coexistence with the West, and things like that. Right? And those two legacies are quite contradictory to each other in their guiding principle, but they all exist in current Chinese foreign policy. It's shaping the policymakers' idea in the Chinese foreign policy. So that's why in a lot of cases you find that China's policy contradicts with each other a lot. Like for example, on the one hand, you find that the Chinese are providing diplomatic support for Palestine, and for armed struggles. So China is explicitly supporting armed struggles of the Palestinians. I want to make that very clearly, right? And that's the stance of the Chinese from 1960s until right now. It never changed. Is supporting the fact that the Palestinians have the rights of armed struggle. And meanwhile, China is supporting Iran on several diplomatic platforms and things like that, right? Like that's one hand you see this thing, and another hand you see that China is deepening its trade with Western allies in that region, or puppet, or whatever you want to call it, which including the Gulf Arab states and Israel. I mean, Israel is like after the last, after the October 7th thing, because the Israelis are very unhappy about Chinese diplomatic stance, so this trade is dropping as well. But before that, the trade was between Israel and China was increasing, and started to drop in the last couple of years. So you see this contradiction is that China is diplomatically more closer to Iran, but economically more closer to the Gulf countries and to Israel. And as I was talking about in the previously, it's like if you want to understand Iranian foreign policy, Iranian regime, or whatever you want to call it, is not only like one person, right? Have different factions. Some are more pro-Western or incrementalist, or pro-trade, while others are more sticking to armed struggle, are more like in supportive of Palestinians, and more anti-Israel. That's how you understand Iran. Right? Same thing, you see that in Russia. Some westernizing camps existing, some anti-Western camps existing in Kremlin. And same thing, I would say, like if you want to understand Chinese foreign policy, same way. There's more Maoist groups existing, more Dengist groups existing, and the overall, I would say that the Chinese leader, the supreme leader, is more like balancing between two approaches. Like on the one hand, sometimes the supreme leader is supporting more politically anti-imperialist struggles, while like sometimes like he recognized that we still need better trade relationship for the economy of China. So it's like always like in this sense. So, but with what is going on in the last few years in the region, is that this contradiction between the Maoist legacy and Dengist legacy is getting more and more severe. So this so-called balanced approach that China has been doing in the last 20 years or more is about to come to an end, because it's not able to sustain. It's not sustainable. In the last 20 years or something, it was okay that you, like everyone accepted the fact that you trade with Iran, and you trade with Saudi Arabia, you trade with Israel, and everyone is happy with that. But with the current situation, it's not going to work anymore, right? So it's getting like more and more acute. This conflict in the region is getting more and more acute, and thus the contradiction in Chinese foreign policy is getting more and more unsustainable as well. So eventually, what I believe is that China would have to reconsider its foreign policy. That's my personal view, and it's so same thing toward the globe as well. In China-U.S. relation, you see the same dynamic. It's like sometimes China is more like anti-imperialistic. Sometimes China is more incrementalist. But you see that right now, like 4 years ago, Russia was pushed to the corner, and the war was, I would argue, not everyone agree with me, I know, but I would argue that the war was imposed on Russia. Even though Russia was the one launching the war, but the war is imposed on Russia. And through that process of being imposed the war, the pro-Western faction in Russia basically like faded away, because there you have no choice, right? And today we're seeing that the war is imposed on Iran, and then the pro-Western voice in Iran is basically fading away because you have no choice. And I imagine that tomorrow, in a not a far future, next 1 year, 2 year, or something closer to that, I imagine that the Chinese would be pushed to the corner too. There will be some sort of conflict imposed on China, and the Chinese would be pushed into the corner. And eventually, the Chinese would get into the same process of the pro-Western, pro-trade faction is going to lose its relevancy, and the Chinese will realize that by Chinese I mean like not only the policymakers but also the entire society would realize that we have no other choice but to pursue a closer alliance with Russia, with Iran, with any other similar groups in the world, and we have no other choice rather than take a more assertive stance in defending our own national security and national interest, even at the cost of sacrificing a lot of economic interest or even stability that we wanted. So yeah, so that's the I would say like I would argue that this should be the methodology or point of view, the logic, whatever we use to understand the situation happening in China, happening in Iran with Russia, and if you use that as the way to understand the situation, you would clearly see that it's leading to one trend, and I would argue that the trend is happening. Yeah.
So you feel like there will be a much more stronger bond between Russia, Iran, and China in future? Is that what you're hinting at?
Yeah, I believe so,
Okay.
and I think that's beyond the even beyond the subjective judgment of those leaders. It's not about like oh like I subjectively love Iran that much or whatever thing. It's like you will be eventually pushed to that situation because the West is imposing war on Russia and Iran already, and they're going to impose that pressure on China very soon, or is already happening. So eventually, the three countries will be pushed to closer. And also, if you look at what happened in the last a few years, the reason why China, Russia, and Iran were not that close is because, as we were mentioning, there's more pro-Western groups and more anti-Western groups existing in all three countries, right? So there was this ideas like when the Chinese want to promote something, they're like disappointed that there's pro-Western factions in Iran or pro-Western factions in Russia, and same thing vice versa, right? But when we see is that like when we see eventually all three countries get dragged into the conflict, there will be no other choice. So eventually, like those pro-Western voices will become irrelevant, and the more hardcore factions existing in all three countries, they would eventually have to talk to each other and form more coordination and things like that, and supporting each other to survive, and understanding that the security of each other is related to the security of yourself. It's something that they yet made it public, but I'm pretty sure that eventually they're going to publicly support each other, and understanding that we have no other choice rather than supporting each other. It's just a matter of time. And I think this is a trend going. And yeah, that's my analysis. I feel like this is a trend going, and this objective trend is going to eventually glue them together, regardless of what they are thinking subjectively in their brain at this moment.
Well, thank you very much, Sheng, for your thoughtful commentary and taking the time to talk to me. It's been a pleasure listening to you. And I've also read a couple of your articles, very insightful, very deep with analytical thinking. So I'll put a link of a couple of your articles in my video description also when I post it, so readers or viewers can read those articles also. Uh, Thanks for that, and have a great day. I'll stop recording
Yeah.
now.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.